As one of the most popular superheroes of all time, Spider-Man has faced many amazing villains since he first swung onto pages in 1962. Considering the Wallcrawler has arguably the best rogues gallery in Marvel Comics history, it's fair to say that many have gone on to become as iconic and ingrained in pop culture as the Webhead himself. With the likes of the Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and Venom being as popular as they are, you might assume that every foe the writers at Marvel introduced to cause havoc and mayhem in New York would be of a similar quality. But unfortunately, that is very much not the case, which is exactly what we're here to talk about today, as I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 strangest Spider-Man villains. Number 10. Grizzly. Although looks aren't everything, they are certainly a big reason as to why Grizzly is a really strange Spider-Man villain. Tearing his way onto pages in 1974, the character's had a surprisingly lengthy run in Marvel's comics, being a big player in Secret War as well as a member of the anti-hero group the Thunderbolts. Ex-wrestler Maxwell Markham is the relatively boring Grizzly. Possessing superhuman strength, durability, claws, and fangs, his powers leave a lot to be desired, since the character doesn't have any particularly memorable attributes that make him stand out from the crowd. He's ultimately let down by a ridiculous grizzly bear costume that makes him look like he's just left a children's birthday party. Unfortunately, the character's downfall comes from a mixture of the ridiculous costume, as well as the bland abilities he has. The somewhat similar foe Kraven the Hunter, who famously wears an equally odd coat with an entire lion's face on it, shows that as long as there is an element of fear and genuine challenge for Spider-Man to overcome, the villain will be remembered fondly by fans. So perhaps since Grizzly doesn't have a difficult or special skill set that would worry Spider-Man, he doesn't enjoy the level of popularity that other villains have. Number 9. Man-Wolf. Now, many of Spider-Man's foes are themed around animals, with this usually being a decent concept that Marvel seems to have replicated over and over again. For the most part, this is a great idea, as it can introduce unique characteristics that Spider-Man hasn't had to face before, such as Dr. Octopus's 4 robotic arms, or Chameleon's ability to essentially disappear through his many disguises. Sadly, this formula hasn't always worked out though, particularly in the case of Man-Wolf. John Jameson, son of the Daily Bugle boss, became the youngest recruit for NASA, and went on several daring missions, one of which saw the young astronaut secretly take a special gemstone amongst some rock samples from the surface of the moon. Wanting to keep the stone for himself, Jameson wore it around his neck as a pendant, but quickly found out it had some malevolent attributes. On the night of a full moon, Jameson would transform into a werewolf and cause havoc in New York City. While not the worst villain ever, Man-Wolf is exactly what you would expect, a werewolf. The potential for the character certainly is great. Being the son of Peter Parker's biggest day-to-day foe creates a fantastic additional rivalry between the photographer and his boss, unbeknownst to Jameson, but it's wasted, as Man-Wolf is filled with tropes, unoriginality, and oddities. Number 8. Screwball. Possibly the least intimidating villain on this list, Screwball is an internet prankster who livestreams her antics to millions of fans. She first initially arrived to comic books in 2008, and since then has been a real nuisance for Spider-Man. While never being a major threat to New York, Screwball spent most of her criminal life robbing banks and giving Spidey a run for his money when it comes to parkour, frequently managing to slip through the hero's fingers. She has also worked with Dr. Octopus to kidnap Norman Osborn's daughter, though that was quickly stopped by Spider-Man. The character resurfaced relatively recently, making an appearance in the Spider-Man PlayStation game, where she continues her irritating antics. After tricking the Wallcrawler into thinking she had a hostage, Screwball got Peter to perform a long list of different tasks, much to the delight of her fans, watching it all through her livestream. Once Spider-Man realized that she didn't have a hostage, Screwball posed virtually no threat at all, with her being dealt with and arrested extremely quickly. With her providing a welcome change in tone compared to other villains like the Green Goblin, Screwball is still a decent member of Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, even if she is more of an irritant than she is an actual villain. Number 7. Slide. First sliding onto comic book pages in 1985, this villain isn't exactly one of the best Marvel characters ever created, even though he does have a pretty nifty costume. Jerome Beecher, a chemical engineer working for Beaumont Manufacturing, created a substance that made all surfaces completely frictionless. Sadly, he was let go from his job after the company was bought, with Beecher's new bosses not being particularly keen on his experiments. Wanting to continue his work, Jerome turned to crime, robbing banks and easily escaping in a suit coated in his slippery substance. Although Slide's suit allowed him to become a master escape artist, evading both the police and Spider-Man with relative ease, his powers never made him a significant threat to New York, or old Webhead himself. The Rogue's biggest claim to fame is that he's able to slide at 30 miles per hour, which isn't really that fast when you think about it. And the fact that he would generally try to avoid a direct confrontation with Spidey at all doesn't help improve his villainous image. Considering he only once baited Spider-Man into fighting him before getting completely thrashed, Slide probably won't be remembered as one of the greats. Number 6. Sticks and Stone. Mad scientist Gerald Stone and homeless man Jacob Eichhorn made up the duo Sticks and Stone. Although the pair certainly are bizarre, their powers are cool, yet horrifying. Stone approached Eichhorn, wanting him to participate in some medical trials, to which he agreed. Without telling him, Stone injected a clueless Eichhorn with a mutated cancerous compound, which resulted in him becoming immune to all cancers, as well as being able to kill whatever he touched. Eichhorn, now called Sticks, found that he needed to drain life from organisms in order to survive, but the experiment had also altered his mind, meaning he now found great pleasure in causing others to rot away. Stone, feeling immense guilt for what he had done, joined forces with Sticks, promising him he would find a cure. Taking on the job to kidnap Mary Jane for the millionaire Jonathan Caesar, the pair were defeated by Spider-Man, and then sent to prison. Re-emerging years later, Stone had turned into a grotesque, rocky giant, with rotting powers very similar to Sticks. However, the pair were trounced by Spidey with some help from Deadpool, after they attacked a village in Bolivia. So Sticks and Stone are some pretty interesting villains, with some unique and terrifying powers, even if they are a bit strange. Number 5. Pandemania. Appearing in the first issue of The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3 in 2014, Pandemania is a truly baffling villain, having virtually no distinctive characterization other than looking like a panda. This panda fanatic is a strange mix of boring and strange. Very little is known about her, even her name has not been revealed yet, but everything that's been revealed about her has either been unsurprising or just laughable. She clearly has superhuman strength, as she's seen lifting a car in the air, but that still isn't especially interesting, as this is possibly the most common superpower of all time. Pandemania also has one of the stupidest costumes and names ever put to a comic book page, not looking too dissimilar to the equally hilarious Grizzly. Her panda costume makes her look like a cuddly toy, and her fluffy glove doesn't exactly help with her villainous image. Potentially, Pandemania is one of the strangest and worst villains in Spider-Man's entire Rogues Gallery. As the newest villain on this list, only having 9 years of comic book history, it may be slightly unfair to criticize Pandemania to this extent. Still, if Marvel wants to push for interesting and frightening villains, it would probably be for the best if they either completely reinvent Pandemania or forget about her altogether. Number 4. Big Wheel. Big Wheel lives in infamy as one of Spider-Man's most ridiculous villains. Debuting in Amazing Spider-Man issue 182, Jackson Wheel operated a comically oversized wheel that has a variety of different weapons, including rocket launchers, dual machine guns, and hydraulic arms. After being blackmailed by the Rocket Racer, the corrupt businessman who had been pocketing money from his company, Jackson turned to the terrible Tinkerer for a mechanized suit to ambush the Speedy Fiend. The Tinkerer is well known in the New York criminal black market for his brilliant engineering skills, working for the likes of mob boss Hammerhead, the Hobgoblin, and Beetle. Unfortunately, the Big Wheel is probably something he would like to forget. While the machine itself is a feat of technical genius, being heavily armoured and having the ability to scale buildings with ease, that doesn't exactly translate as a particularly cool or imposing villain for Spider-Man. Once you see through all the nifty gadgets and abilities of the machine, all you're left with is an angry businessman driving an outrageously stupid wheel, who has never really been a major threat for the Wallcrawler. Number 3. Stiltman. Despite looking completely ludicrous, Stiltman has managed to make himself quite the headache for both Spider-Man and Daredevil. Working as a scientist for Carl Caxton, Wilbur Day stole designs for a hydraulic ram device, which he later incorporated into strong metallic legs. Dubbing himself Stiltman, Wilbur used his suit for robberies, though was constantly halted by the Devil of Hell's Kitchen. With his metallic legs allowing him to reach up to 290 feet, Stiltman's battle armor was also coated in a silicon compound, which meant that Spidey's webs were virtually useless against him. He's been a member of many nefarious groups, including the Emissaries of Evil with Electro and Leapfrog, amongst others, and has worked with the likes of the Kingpin and Doctor Doom. Even though he was never a great villain, Stiltman would eventually change his ways, signing up to be a law enforcer during Marvel's Civil War period. But tragically, after chasing down a criminal, Wilbur would die after bumping into the Punisher. Although he would try to convince Castle he was no longer a crook, the anti-hero wouldn't believe him, shooting and killing Stiltman in the process. Number 2. Hypno Hustler. A truly peculiar villain, Hypno Hustler first appeared in Peter Parker The Spectacular Spider-Man issue 24, and is nothing more than an absolute joke. Whilst admittedly unique, the Hypno Hustler is not what you would call a great villain, and his powers revolving around disco music certainly date him. Antoine Delcien, also known as the Hypno Hustler, is the lead singer of the Mercy Killers, and possesses special hypnotic equipment. Using his hypnotic guitar and goggles, the hustler is able to hypnotize his victims and force them to hand over their valuables. The criminal initially hypnotized the manager of the club Beyond Forever when he was caught stealing money from the safe. The singer then hypnotized the audience into giving him their money. But unfortunately for him, Peter Parker was at the club and swiftly stopped the Mercy Killers as they tried to escape. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Donald Glover is set to star as the villain in his own spin-off movie, which is a little strange when you consider that the actor has already appeared as Miles Morales' uncle in Spider-Man Homecoming. If this report is true, then clearly Sony are willing to scrape the bottom of the barrel for their Spider-Man villain solo movies. And number 1, Kangaroo. Easily the villain that will leave you scratching your head the most is Kangaroo. Bouncing onto comic book pages in 1970, Frank Oliver spent his years living with wild kangaroos in Australia, where he developed expert jumping skills and agility. He decided to take up boxing once he became proficient in these abilities, though he was soon banned after seriously injuring his opponent by jump kicking him in the face. Fleeing to the United States, Oliver quickly turned to a life of crime, stealing a briefcase containing harmful bacteria, but was quickly thwarted by Spider-Man. The two had a second confrontation at the Hudson River lab, though this too ended badly for Kangaroo, with him dying from exposure to a dangerous radioactive isotope. Oliver wasn't the only criminal silly enough to call himself the Kangaroo though. Brian Hibbs took on the mantle after being inspired by the skills of his predecessor, wearing a suit that granted him a deadly pouch cannon and the ability to jump great distances. Again though, Hibbs was likewise also easily defeated by the Webhead. So at the end of the day, both incarnations of the villain are nothing more than petty crooks who can leap abnormally high. But at least they look absolutely ridiculous while they're doing it. So there we have it, friends and foes, the 10 strangest Spider-Man villains. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments below if you did. Don't forget you can follow me on Twitter @PanelsToPixels, subscribe to What Culture Comics, and we'll see you next time.